Welcome to WeAreSC. This is Erik McKinney, joined by Greg Katz. Greg, let's talk USC Washington State. Finally set for a Sunday afternoon 4:30 kickoff on FS1, and this is a game that had a lot of and still does have a lot of apprehension about it in terms of, is it going to kick off? It's another one of those Pac-12 games where both teams dealing with kind of their own COVID issues. That this was originally scheduled for Friday, pushed back to Sunday. USC is coming off a week where they didn't play. Washington State is coming off 2 weeks that they haven't played. What do you see maybe some of those issues having an effect on this game?
Well, we just don't know how fine-tuned either team will be. We don't know what the combinations are going to be. We don't know who some of the players who are out. In the case of USC, we know it's been reported it's the offensive line that's in question, but we don't know which players on the offensive line are in question. We don't know who's going to replace any starters if it's in question. So, it could be nothing to worry about. It could be everything to worry about. And I'm going to assume that it's somewhere in between. So from that standpoint, there is concern about just the continuity and maybe even a little bit of conditioning. As far as Washington State's concerned, they're in the same boat. They've had people go out. Even their starting quarterback, true freshman Jaden DeLoria, has suffered from COVID-19. So, I don't think we're going to see both teams at peak efficiency of game 12 in a season. But I think it's a very intriguing matchup based on the strengths and weaknesses of both teams.
Yeah, I think for USC with this, it's nice to be the home team. It's nice not to have to travel in sort of a weird week and kind of get things together when, again, you're waiting maybe for, last day, last minute for some of these guys to be able to clear to play in this game. Washington State has said they should travel just about everybody. I think the latest update from them was less than 5 players that they would be without for this game. USC kind of still up in the air as to how many of those guys they'll get back, but clearly the plan at this point is they'll get enough guys back on that offensive line to be able to have at least that minimum of 7 number, and a lot of those guys coming back theoretically should be those starters that USC is going to need. I also see maybe this game being a little bit sloppy early as guys kind of get back into it. Now, you're used to having a bye week during the season, so for USC, that's not a huge issue, but you're not used to having days where you don't practice at all and having days where you practice with maybe a completely different offensive line. Washington State, again, they've had to shut down a little bit, and this is 2 weeks off for them. So that'll be interesting to see if one of these teams can really put it together early and kind of jump out ahead and take control of the game. That could end up being a key when it comes to this. Let's talk USC offense against that Washington State defense. Your key to that side of the game, key matchup, anything like that, again, when USC has the ball.
Well, I think it goes back to almost Bill Murray Groundhog Day. We don't know exactly how USC is going to attack a team that rushes 3 and drops 8. Teams are daring USC to run the ball, and I know that's not what Graham Harrell wants to do. He wants to throw the ball and throw it and throw it. And not that he's against running the ball, but it's basically kind of like, okay, we got to throw in a couple there, keep them honest. So, I don't see, or I should say, I think the key is going to be just how USC decides to attack an 8-drop defense. And so far, we're led to believe that it's been very difficult for them to either admit, adjust, or I'm not saying it's the players, because the players are going to do what the play is called. So, I would think that Washington State would be in a zone deep to take away it all. And if they aren't, I don't know why you would want to play SC's wide receivers, man up. To me, it's like, saying, come and get it. And, somebody like Drake London, who's been fairly quiet the last game or so, could just explode against a defense that's really suspect. It's giving up, I think, 35 some points a game. So it's there if SC wants to be patient in attacking that defense.
And that's where I think it comes in. It's almost USC is almost a victim of its own success. The wide receivers are so good. Keaton Slovis last year was so good that teams are saying we are not going to match up in a way that you can just beat us like that all the time. And so now it becomes, how do you adjust to what they are doing? And yes, yeah, you may not have to see it on film. Okay, they don't drop, 7, 8 guys deep constantly in a zone look, but that's what's coming. That's what teams are going to throw at USC. And so I've not that I've given up on thinking, hey, they're going to run the ball 45, 50, 55 times a game, but boy, at this point, I'd be surprised to see that. So my matchup is going to be the USC wide receivers out there against those Washington State defensive backs, specifically in terms of tackling. How does Washington State tackle those guys? If you're going to make them throw it short and come up and tackle, you got to bring down Amon-Ra St. Brown. You got to bring down Brew McCoy, guys like that on short passes. And we saw against Utah a couple times, Tyler Vaughn specifically able to kind of catch a short pass, break a tackle, and go for a long run after that. So again, Washington State coming off 2 weeks without a game. This could be kind of a rude awakening to get that group of guys outside if, again, USC is really going to continue to try to throw the ball and also accept, hey, we've got to complete some short passes and see what we can do with the ball after the catch. I think that could end up being a big story for this game, how the Washington State defensive backs tackle the USC wide receivers. Let's flip it over. Your key on the other side when Washington State has the ball.
Well, I think Washington State really has a good offense, and they know what they're doing. They've got the players to do it. And for a run and shoot, they're fairly balanced in that they can present both a running attack with some outstanding running backs and wide receivers. I think one of the keys to note, first of all, is you got a true freshman quarterback in Jaden DeLauria. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year, by the way, in Hawaii his senior year. And, he's very familiar with Nick Rolovich, who was the former head coach of Hawaii. And, of course, Rolovich has seen DeLauria play for a number of years in high school. So they fit in just nicely. Running back-wise, you've got senior Deion McIntosh, who's averaging about 119.5 yards per game, which is a lot when you consider it's a run and shoot offense. But actually, the guy to keep an eye on who's coming back from injury is Max Borhe, who's about 6 feet, 205. And he really is an all-star player in the Pac-12 when he's healthy, not only running the ball, but catching the ball. Wide receivers, they're going to run not a lot of formations, but they're going to have 2 to each side of the field, 3-1 set. You're going to have senior Renard Bell, who's averaging 13.6 yards per reception, and junior Travell Harris at 12.6. So what I like about their offense, and I think this is really important, they have a good offense, and they're going to face a USC attacking defense of Todd Orlando, where SC is going to try to blitz. What they're going to try to do is they're going to try to really, really upset DeLauria early and try to make him into a true freshman rather than an experienced sophomore. And that's going to be a big thing, because if they don't get to him early and the kid starts getting a little, confidence under his belt, he's got the skills. And Rolovich, it's very interesting because when he was hired, Clay Helton has said, he says, when we saw that he got hired, we know that he's going to be, I think the quote was, he's going to be a pain in the butt in this conference, because he does have a system. He's like Leach. He knows what he's doing. So I think SC is going to be challenged. And where the big challenge to me is going to be the wide receivers of Washington State against the secondary of USC. And we know that USC is going to want to man up and be on an island and all that other stuff. Are they going to revert back to pass interference calls? Are they going to be able to tackle in space? And this is what Washington State's going to test. I don't know how early they're going to test it, but it might be right off the bat. But it wouldn't shock me a bit if Washington State tried to establish a running game to keep that SC front seven from just, open the door and here comes the Bulls.
And that's, for me, the key is Washington State running. And that's either with the running back or with Jaden DeLauria. Like you said, he's a he's a good athlete and he can pick up yardage. And he, again, it's so different this year coming to the Coliseum because you don't have the fans. And so the atmosphere is not what it can be in other years. But there are some guys that love that challenge, that love coming to the Coliseum, playing against USC and are not bothered by it as true freshmen. I don't think he will be bothered by it. I think he's really looking forward to this, especially because USC recruited him. They really tried to get him late in that recruiting process in the 2020 class. He stuck with Washington State, did not come to USC. So he's coming down to LA wanting to prove a little bit. I think it's so key for USC's defensive line and really the front four, front six, front seven to shut down a running game, to not give him any kind of comfort, any sort of outlet where, okay, I can hand it off and we can keep moving the ball. Also included in that is you cannot let him sidestep a blitz and go take off for 14, 15 yards. That is key too, to make sure that he only has his arm to beat you with if you're USC's defense. And I think, again, he's got some arm talent, but I think you're okay with that if he doesn't get any help from his legs and from, like you mentioned, some good running backs if Borghi is back and healthy. And then Deion McIntosh this year has kind of shown what he can do. So for me, that's the key. Keeping him in the pocket and feeling like he's got to do it all and he's got to just throw for this win. Because I think that if you're USC, you're probably you're fairly confident in what your secondary has done this year, and you're okay relying on them against the Washington State pass game. So for me, that's kind of the key, is what you can do, how you can affect Jayden de Laura in the pocket, keeping him from getting out of the pocket. So saying all that, how is this game going to play out? How do you see an end result here?
Well, it could get down to special teams. USC's got an outstanding freshman kicker, and Washington State has an outstanding place kicker themselves. So that's going to maybe be a key. And both teams' punters are outstanding. Drusovic, I guess, I'm probably not pronouncing his last name correctly, is one of the best ones in the country. But since we've had a change of Sean Snyder as special teams coach, it appears to me that USC's punting has been a little bit more effective. And I think Ben Griffiths is finding out that he's able to unleash a little bit more. But how does the game play out? I'll say this. I think Washington State's really a good team. They're 1-1. And remember that they opened the season beating Oregon State, in Corvallis, and Oregon State, was able to beat Oregon. And Oregon, was in a dogfight with Washington State. So Washington State has a lot to play for. Obviously, USC has a lot to play for. I think both teams probably figure, hey, we're there. We could be in that Pac-12 championship game. So there's a lot to play for. SC's a 12.5 point favorite. My personal opinion is I think it's going to be a closer game than that. There's nothing that tells me. And I don't mean this to be anything but just reality. Clay Helton teams do not do well when they're heavy favorites. And we saw that in the first two games. And, Utah, of course, hadn't played a game, and they end up playing Utah, and SC doesn't score touchdowns in the second half. There's a lot to be concerned about if this pattern of behavior, if you want to use it that way, stays. So I think SC is going to win, but I don't think it's going to be easy. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be shocked if SC didn't win, only because I think that Washington State has the ability to put points on the board. And if Rolovich figures out what Todd Orlando is doing and can control the ball, and remember, there's one thing that Washington State has that they tend to do. They'll play action, and that could slow up a lot of things. So it's going to be I think it's going to be an entertaining game myself.
You say you wouldn't be, shocked if Washington State won. I would be very surprised. I think USC is the better team, more talent again, with all the kind of sideshow stuff going on. I think they're in probably a better spot again, unless they run out with 7 of the backup offensive linemen, and that's all they have for the game. That's kind of the question mark that hangs over the whole thing when it comes to a prediction. But it's also like you mentioned when you talk about USC lately, if your initial thought is, oh yeah, SC's going to win by 2 touchdowns, you give the other team kind of a touchdown, you take away a field goal from USC, and it's just kind of become what you expect. That it shrinks, so what initially looked like 12 to 14 points, you're down to 5, 6, maybe 7. So I could see something like that, a 6-point win, USC maybe in the mid 30s, with scoring again, like you mentioned, what Washington State has given up this year. But I could see it a little bit similar to that Utah game, where USC kind of takes control and does enough to win over that second half. But when you look at what Utah had offensively and what Washington State is likely going to bring, and yeah, Washington State maybe challenges you a little bit more than Utah was able to. So again, I don't think either of us would be surprised if it's a close game. I do think I do see USC being able to beat Washington State again on Sunday afternoon into the evening, a 4:30 kick, and that's our look previewing USC taking on Washington State. USC going to get back on the field after a week off after their game last week against Colorado, declared a no contest. So again, looking forward to seeing some USC football this weekend. For Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching We Are SC.